There it is, 6 o'clock. Please join me in the pledge of allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which stands one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Yep, thank you. Thank you.
Okay, hello, board, guests.
I'm completely broken. Thank you.
This is the July 12th meeting of the Town of Canandaigua Planning Board. Do you know everybody here at the?
Yes, we've been doing.
Who don't you know? And I'll introduce you.
Well, Amanda, we've never met before.
I'm
usually zooming.
I've been zooming the past few months. I
That would explain it.
had a shoulder break, so
We do
I'm
welcome
recovering. Yes.
Amanda back this evening.
Thank you all.
She's back with a full complement of staff. We do not have our our planning board attorney, Mr. Nadler. We gave him the night off, and our town engineer is maybe available virtually, but he's not there yet. Okay. So I won't go through the procedures as far as what we do here in our meetings because everybody is familiar with them. Everyone knows everyone else. And you folks are your names again?
Marigold, Jim and Mary
Marigold. Marigold, right. Thanks for coming out tonight,
Thanks for being here.
filling the house. Okay, the Marigolds, if you if the lights go off, we have an emergency, please use the exits to my right and left. Hopefully that does not occur. Are you here for privilege of the floor?
Yes, I do.
Okay,
Like
it's your time to speak. If
I can bring over the dais or.
Oh, I think you can hear me without it.
We can.
Would you like me to stand or? can I
Please,
sit?
please
You can
stand,
stand.
name, address, and
Jim Marigold, 3512 Sandy Beach and 3520 East Lake Road. In the past meetings, we've talked about this 3-foot pipeline that they're putting underneath the property to run the water off the south neighbors underneath their property and to release into the north neighbor's property. How is it legal to take water from anywhere and dump it on somebody else's property? Also, the 2 ponds that they have are smaller than the ones that they had in the original renderings that they had for the other when they were trying to make it apartments. So they're now smaller. They've also eliminated the swales. So how are they going to reduce the water that's on their property enough before it releases downstream? I'm under the impression that if I have water on my property going onto somebody else's property, I'm responsible for stopping it. So I would like somebody to explain how the legalities of taking what must be a lot of water if they're putting a 3-foot pipe in. How is that legal to consolidate, pour that water onto their property and dump it on the next neighbor? Then he dumps it on the next neighbor, then, and so forth and so forth.
you're referring to Sunset Bridge.
Yes.
Yes,
Okay, yeah.
I'm not sure what they call it now.
That's where it was approved at, so.
Okay.
In our nomenclature, it is Sunset Ridge. I had the same question you had, if you recall, at the one meeting, I brought it up to the engineer that it was showing a 3-foot outfall from the one basin, the 3-foot pipe. And I was, Mr. Carter? Marks, excuse me, that's right. Brendan explained to me and to the people in attendance that is the overflow pipe should the basin surcharge or overflow. And how the basin works is there's a restrictive pipe, and I think it was a 12-inch, I forget what the size, was the normal outfall of the basin. So it would be water coming into the basin, whatever the basin would start to fill up because of the restriction with the 12-inch pipe. Okay, it would then retain the water to a point and then let it dissipate out of the basin at a controlled rate through the 12-inch pipe. It would be only if the basin would get to an overflow condition. I don't think that, he made it sound like it wasn't something that would occur on a regular basis. And again, if Lance is here, he's not, okay. I'm a plain town engineer, which is dangerous. So the 36-inch pipe was the overflow, it was not the direct outfall from the stream or from the basin. So it would be a restriction. The obligation on the applicant is to control the runoff so that it is no greater than what it was prior to development. So with the development, obviously, there's going to be more blacktop area, roof areas, and the water is going to run. It's not going to be absorbed as much, so it'll run, and that's the purpose of the basin. The water runs into the basin acts as both a retention for the water so that the outfall off the property is no greater than what it was before. And I think Mr. Marks said it was actually going to be less.
That's for the retention ponds you're talking about.
That's for the retention.
I'm talking about, he's talking about putting a swale, trench, whatever you want to call it, along his property line on the south border. And from that south border, when it gets down to the low point, he is putting an underground 3-foot pipe, unabated, across underneath the property and exiting on the north end of the property.
Isn't that to carry the water course that's currently there?
But he's consolidating it from everywhere into a 3-foot pipe.
Right.
And again, it's going to be unabated and it's going to be going in a pipe instead of into the ground where it can absorb most of it. Remember, everybody's talked from the get-go that this is not a watershed, that there's very little water there. Now, all of a sudden, we need a 3-foot pipe to hold all that water that's going to run off.
But I think that's runoff that's being conveyed through the property from the south property line through the property. Water that runs today. I mean, it runs across.
Oh, I
that
understand there's a border, but he's going to put a trench in or a swale
to carry that water
to carry that water. How is it legal that he could take that water and dump it onto the north guy's property?
because it goes there now.
But not in that condensed form. All of a sudden you have 3 feet of water. You know, there's a difference if I get an inch of rain on my property, or if I take a 1-inch hose and start spraying it. It can only, the ground can only absorb so much water at a time.
Yeah, you're saying it's more concentrated.
It's
Concentrated.
yeah,
And it is more concentrated, but I think at the outfall before it crosses the property line to the north, and I'm doing this all from recollection of, looking at the plans a month ago, that he's got like a spreader outfall, and it sort of fans the water out before it goes across the property line. So in theory, the water flow from south across the property to the north should be no greater than what it was currently.
and,
But in a different conveyance system.
and what does your engineer think about that? I mean, does he agree with this assessment of the water flow, what it's gonna be?
Well, I can't speak for him.
I know you.
Yeah. Well, you can certainly hang with us for a while. I'll certainly, if Lance checks in, you can ask him the same question he asked me, and he'll give you a much better answer than I did. But I was just going on my record. Anybody else on the board recall?
That's what I recall. I need to see the map to look at.
Yeah, it's been a little.
Just to confirm, your house, I just looked on the map, your house is right next to the creek as it enters
Yes,
the
sir.
lake. Yeah, I've seen your house.
And that was a concern that I had raised as well, Chuck.
Yep.
Because it does, their intent, as I understood it, was that there wasn't a diversionary technique at the end. And that was part of the concern that it would continue to just pump water straight up to the north. But it does, my recollection is that it cuts across the entire property.
Yeah, it goes from south to north.
But as a result, what would happen is, so you still have the waters that are on the land that go someplace, but they're not gonna make it into that pipe. And they were planning to convey anything that was coming from the south to the north through that pipe. That in theory was already going through the waterways that were on the property. Because that was how they were also replacing the potential wetland that was there.
Can I make a comment? The creek, we call it a creek, that runs along our property and it goes north and goes, I think, behind the trailer park. Is like right now at the Sandy Beach run, it's dry. But the ground is so dry, if we have a big rain like we have had, and it's always, I hate to say it, this coming week in July, it overflows because the ground just cannot absorb, it's too hard to absorb any kind of water. And when it comes over, I've sent pictures, it is, 3 or 4 cottages down and maybe a foot high in some locations.
This is to the north of the property as it crosses.
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
Yeah,
crosses
and I mean,
to the
yes,
west
the
side.
water now is a trickle at best, if it's not there, but it's that 100-year storm that seems to happen every other year that, creates this deluge, and you just need one, and you have property damage.
Yeah,
Lance is on.
Hi, Lance.
Hi, Lance.
I'm sorry, I was having some difficulty getting on. Apparently, it's been a while since I've done this.
That's,
Okay.
that's our tight security. We're here with the Marigold, and they have concerns about regarding Sunset Ridge and the water that's being conveyed, if you recall, across the property that enters the property on the south side and is being,
North side. Or south side, you're right.
North to south. No.
it runs from south
South
to north.
north. Yeah.
Enters on the south side, goes across the property. I think it's proposed to be within a 36-inch culvert and then discharged on the north side out into the trailer park, modular home property. Their concern is, well, go ahead. Why don't you explain to Lance?
Okay, first of all, it wasn't a culvert, it was a 3-foot underground pipe. So there's no evaporation available, which you would have in a culvert.
If it was 3-sided culvert.
Right.
Okay.
They're collecting all the water from the south end, consolidating it, running it across the property and dumping it on the guy next door's property. How is that both legally and, in my mind, morally allowed? How do they know how much water is going to be there? Mark's Engineering keeps saying we're going to be, by doing this, this, and this, we're going to be lowering the outflow. What is your thoughts, and do you agree with the numbers that Mark's Engineering has been giving you?
All right, so basically what, if I understand correctly, you're right, the project shows the water from one side of the property being conveyed through a closed system to the other side of the property. Now, what DEC regulates is that it says off-site runoff does not have to be treated on site and can be conveyed around the property site in a manner that's functional. But obviously, there's regulations that we have to look at, which is what we're doing with the DEC regs. Now, what Mark's Engineering is proposing to do, and we're still working through the details of their engineering design on those facilities. Ultimately, they're conveying some of that runoff from offsite through their site, through open swales, and then ultimately through this closed system. And then it's going to be conveyed to the other side of the property where it's entering, in some capacity, their stormwater management facilities, and others, it's just being discharged directly out. What we have to prove to DEC, what they have to prove to us before it goes to DEC, is that one, we're not negatively impacting the neighboring property, meaning that we're not putting more water on them than what was going on them beforehand. That has to happen. That is what they're documenting right now. Two, their facilities are being oversized to handle the what-if storms. DEC says it has to be designed to 100-year. They're doing that, and then they're providing additional capacity above that. Three, they're doing green infrastructure on site that does allow some of that offsite runoff to enter their site and then ultimately infiltrate into the ground before it ultimately overflows and discharges offsite. So what we have to do, and we have not approved, the planning board has approved the preliminary overall, but what we're working through is the final design of that stormwater facility so that it's fully compliant with not only the town of Canandaigua criteria, but also the New York State DEC's criteria, which is what the obligation is.
Okay, and what are your thoughts as far as the numbers that Mark's Engineering have been giving you? Do you agree with them, disagree?
I think
Has
he's
it
going
been
through,
researched?
He's going through them right now. I think that.
Yeah, I mean, at this point, I mean, Mark's Engineering is providing what they can. We're also doing a review against those plans to make sure that it makes sense from both standpoints. At this point, MRB Group, nor the town of Canandaigua has officially approved that final product. So it's still being worked through.
All right, and have you noticed that the 2 retention ponds are smaller than what they had proposed when they had the apartment complex, and that they've also eliminated many of the cross-property swales that they had that would have helped absorb much of the water?
Sure. I mean, I think what we're seeing now is a much more green space than what we had originally. So there's more open space and less impervious surface being proposed on this project than what was being proposed beforehand. That's one of the reasons why the facilities may in their overall shape be a little bit smaller, but they are obligated to do just as much as they were doing before as they are now. They still have to meet the highest standard that's required of every project that comes to the town, and that's the DEC requirement. And currently they are. Now, is there ability to do more? And that's what we're trying to work through. What can we do to provide more improvements on the site? And that's what we're trying to do.
Keep up the good work, then.
Okay,
That's all I can ask, I guess.
It's valuable you came this evening because I think it's something that this board and Lance will be looking at because we have the final plans. We only preliminary approve, like the overall. They've got to do the detail engineering for each section as they go up the hill. So assuming the first section is the section down by 364, which includes this pipe, we'll certainly make sure, and Lance will make sure that by taking that stream, which is now an open channel stream, and putting it into a 36-inch pipe, that it does not have a negative effect on the upstream neighbors, the downstream neighbors, and the new neighbors, the new property owners that live in the development. So I think, trust us to do that.
I trust you, but verify. Thank you.
And thank you for bringing it to our attention. I appreciate your coming out to see clean that out. It's something you have to look, be careful of and look at and make sure that the way they control that open channel flow, like you always said, it's now runs all over the place when you get a heavy rain. But if you put it in a controlled pipe and you shoot it out the outfall,
It's like a fire hose coming out.
could be. All righty. Thank you for coming. Anybody else with privilege of the floor? Okay, if not, let's move ahead. We have no public hearings tonight, so there's no reason to do any publishing of legal notices. And since there are no public hearings or new site plans to review, let's move on to board business. First being the approval of minutes from our June 29th meeting. I think there were at least one revision, so can I get a motion to approve it as revised?
So moved. Second.
Okay, Scott, Bob on the second. Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, we got some money to give away. Get in line. Yeah, don't leave.
Hold on.
We're having the raffle. First is a release from CPN 2019-029, Richard Gray, property owner at 4959 Island Beach Drive, requesting a surety release of $800.
$800 or $600.
The resolution, if we had it, would read typical SOP. So can I have a motion to approve the release?
I will make that motion to release 800 to 19029.
Okay,
Second,
Great
Was that Mark?
residence.
Mark, it was.
I got a motion and a second. It's 12. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye, opposed? Ms. Karen, please get the $800 back. Okay, the second one is for Vanessa Shepherd, owner of property at 2524 Cooley Road. requesting surety release. Boy, I'm trying to look at this. $600. Someone want to give me a motion?
I'd make the motion that we release the 600 for 21-048.
One second.
Okay, got a motion second, all in favor?
Aye.
One's opposed, the motion carries. So that takes care of those two. I should note that these requests were signed by the code enforcement officer, the highway superintendent prior to are taking action, so what did Tom Schwartz used to say, all the appropriate,
Yeah, what did they say?
what did he used to say?
I don't know. I remember
Yeah,
it was
yeah,
one of
all
those
the
meetings.
appropriate characters that signed it. Suspects, that's what he called them, suspects.
Mhm.
All righty. Referrals from town board. I think we have two. to discuss a bit. One is the agricultural protection overlay district, which was handed out
The last meeting.
last meeting. Sean, do you want to give us a review of simply what it's doing?
So this is, I guess, simply,
You had your map last time.
I did.
That's all right.
I did.
You recall the map with
Does
the red
everybody
line?
remember the map? All right. So basically, anything in that designated area that's 7 acres or more would, prior to extension of water and sewer, would need town board approval. That's really the nuts and bolts of it. It's not precluding development whatsoever, but it's just giving an extra layer of protection if development was proposed.
I was kind of surprised to see that they did not talk about solar in there. For the use of their land for that.
I asked about that, and the answer was, it's a bigger discussion, bigger ordinance proposal.
I asked a question. I know the water and sewer extension is a hot topic, and I think we talked about it a lot during the training day that we had here in April. Are there like pie in the sky timelines for extending, or is it a needs-based sort of plan to extend if there's a need or a applicant comes in and goes through the hoops here?
Well, we do have a plan for different districts, and I can assure, but that area does not have a plan for water and sewer extension. Or sewer rather,
Okay,
yeah.
Yeah, we have a water and sewer master plan that we've done for the town, which kind of highlights the overall goal of the town of Canandaigua and where they look to develop in the future. That might be, I think that might be on the website, Amanda. I'm not totally sure of that, but I believe.
It is,
it is.
yeah.
Wish we could overlay some of those maps with each other, like it sometimes.
We could do that.
Okay. Okay.
You get a little bit of it in Encore because it does have the sewer district in there.
Yeah.
It
So
does,
you can
it
see that
does.
and then use the layers for that.
Mhm.
I do
Have
know
you
that.
played with the layers at all? I didn't mean to interrupt you, Mark. No?
No,
I
not,
have.
no, probably to the extent that everyone.
You can do that.
Yeah.
We need a GIS map, don't we, that has the sewer and the water.
We do have it, but I
Layer.
think you're talking maybe over on ag and all of our
Right.
layers and layers.
Yes, everything in the room down the hall, yeah. Mhm.
So I do know that there's some hope by IDA to extend the sewer connection that runs in front of the airport. Short extension, I mean, they want to get to the other side of the airport, is what their hope is. But I think that's the only other thing that I've been able to find that was planned. so to
That's
speak.
the only one I know of.
And that's out of this.
That's out of this
Yeah.
district. There's nothing planned for this area.
I think the concern is, obviously, anything the town or the county puts in, we can control. But if a developer comes in, buys a piece of land, and then his cost and his expense, he extends the sewer
Sure.
line into this area, he has the right to do it if he wants to pay for it. So that, I think that's what we're trying to control here, just another set of eyes, making sure that, or another approval that's required prior to that happening.
Isn't that right? They can do that. They can connect into the sewer system without permission, so to speak. We can't.
Well, they
prevent
have to,
them from
they have to
connecting.
create a sewer dish. But it can be,
As long as their capability
I
or
guess it would
capacity
be,
with.
As long as
right.
it meets the spec.
you know,
And they would be, I can't imagine that it cost wise.
well, here's works. Well, that's kind of.
Yeah, they're connecting on both sides.
What if they connect across the street to somebody new? That's an easy way to go.
That
That's
came
easy.
up during the discussion of Pierceville, yeah,
Yeah.
could it be
Exactly.
extended?
Mhm.
Yeah. So
Potential there.
how does the board feel? I know it was kicked around in ordinance committee, that's why it came out of ordinance. And went to town board scheduled a hearing and when hearing schedule, any ordinance that regarding planning, it comes out to the planning board, so. The only thing I saw was the last sentence, any expansion of publicly owned water or sewer lines in the agriculture protection overlay district must be approved by the town board of the town of Cantoga prior to the planning board granting major subdivision. Shouldn't that be preliminary?
Right.
Yeah, I.
Yes, because
Unless we,
that's
in
what
our
would
new
be locked
definition
in.
of subdivision, we have major.
Well, it is.
But it's
major
not-
is before-
But it's,
before
it,
lots.
that's rated number of lots.
You're talking the actual procedure. I agree with you. Preliminary.
Preliminary would be what
Yes.
the planning board would. So
Mhm.
that's the only comment I would have. Anybody else have any comments on that
Is that
particular?
the
draft?
last?
Yeah, the last.
Very
Be-
last.
20.
All right, the other one we have to comment on is the subdivision of land. Save this to last. This is so simple, Sean. First, does everyone get the drift of what's trying to happen here? It goes back to this private drive.
Yeah, so, right. There's some cleaning up that we did, just minor things to address form-based code, because that's the district that we needed to address subdivisions within form-based code. It did stem from driveways, private drives, private roads, lack of definitions and lack of parameters for staff and the board to follow. And it's kind of evolved into and not only that, and neighbors living on a private drive wanting the town to take it over because it isn't maintained, it's not up to standard. And this is me coming in, it's been a year, but the things that I've seen in the years that I've been here. Doug could speak better or, more thoroughly to it, but so, and we noticed that in our fee schedule, we had a major and we had a minor subdivision, but we never had it in code, we never had it codified, really. So it made its way through ordinance, and really the significant part of it is 3 lots or less is a minor subdivision. That 4th lot kicks something into major, and at that point, any road would be brought up to a public standard. That's significant. That's, I would say, the most significant part of this. Because there's many private drives on the lake. That 4th lot is gonna kick some private drives up to standards that they might not be able to meet. Maybe, financially, then they decide they aren't gonna be able to do what they wanna do. But it's also a way to protect private interest and public interest.
Can you discuss how that's gonna affect Linda and that subdivision that's planned up there?
Why weren't you a PRC yesterday? We talked about this for an hour and a half.
Just give me Reader's Digest.
Well, the short answer is the application's been filed, so whatever we
Right.
do here doesn't apply
Right, that's a good
on Linda
answer.
regarding
Yeah.
that, but improvements have to be made up there.
Right, there's
Definitely.
improved. But there's not a lot of room, obviously, to do improvements on Linda. There's gonna be a lot of lots that are pre-existing and non-conforming, and they stay the way they are. There is literally no room on Linda.
But if this was in effect,
Mhm.
when the application came in, Linda would have to become public street.
Linda would be public street.
Yep.
Hillcrest would be public,
Mhm.
and there wouldn't be the issues that we have there. I can think of many others. There's some over in Lakewood Meadows, same thing. Linda, that's an interesting one, because the private drive off of it.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And there's no easement to their properties for that drive. They're
they're
property
proposing
sit
an
right
easement
through the middle. That'd be good
for the back. Are we talking Westbrook's?
for the Westbrook and, or just on those properties going all the way up the road, their properties split the road
Yes,
all the way up. So
yes.
there's no easement on the road at all. There's half those, the road is owned by those. So there's no way to, unless they changed and gave an easement all the way on their road.
Clearly, a handshake easement, I think, as I call it. It's
Is
it's
that
not
the
a
15
recorded easement.
foot that they're talking
Right,
about?
yeah, well,
Yeah.
There's
they own, like Bob said, they
Yeah.
own, it's a 30-foot right of, they own easement.
On there.
And it shows on the plan that way, but they own 15 feet to the center of that
Yes.
30 feet. Yep. And so folks who on the east side, 15 feet, and then Westbrook, and those properties on the west side, 15 feet, and they meet in the middle. But there's no recorded easement, method of maintenance for on Linda, and all we do is keep adding more lots up there, and it's just making a bad problem worse. And you know, I think we've got to put our foot down, and I think it's coming to that point. It's going on for 11 years. Yep. So, but moving forward, you wouldn't apply to any of the existing private drives unless they subdivide. If they do a site plan, if it's an existing lot, and we've done a lot of those,
Mhm.
existing lots have tear downs, rebuilds,
Rebuilds.
there's good. But if someone comes in and wants to subdivide on a private drive, and it's going beyond the 4 lots, then
Then it kicks it in.
technically we could tell them they've got to bring that
Yes.
thing up to town standards.
Right.
And you really get to know your neighbors, that would be good. Hey, folks, well, look at your street. I mean.
Right. Absolutely.
Sure. So what are we trying to protect them from? What's the public?
Well, I don't want to speak for Doug and staff and administration, but I think they have a lot of issues with people calling up and saying, my neighbor's having a party, it's blocking the driveway. My neighbors aren't willing to chip in to have a road repair. There's a lot of potholes. Sometimes the degree of how a road should be maintained differs. Property owner, to property owner. Some people feel everything should be paved and smooth. Some people say, as long as you can get them down the thing.
To live through that. So, but I also, I mean, as a purchaser going into it, I look at it, I understood that when I went into it, I knew that I would have those issues. So we're trying to protect them from themselves. Is that effectively?
And I'm
Well,
sure,
yeah,
I'm sure you read the covenants, restrictions, documents before you went into it. I think a lot of people don't.
And there's a real life safety issue. I mean, I can argue through things like life safety because apparatus have a difficult time getting into those things.
Well,
And then everything that's expected with that.
Then I think the ultimate is they come to the town and say, we want you to take over the road because we don't want to take over it. So here you've got a raggedy looking road that they want the town, I pay taxes. I pay taxes. Why shouldn't I have my road, my street maintained like everybody else? So if it's up to standards in the first place, it's a lot easier to take it over.
So what would be extenuating circumstances at that point? What's an example of?
Extenuating in the
How
sense of-
so? And
Well, it states, I mean, the proposed document states that they have to prove some form of hardship that the planning board could then approve it. I'm just curious as to
What would be a
what
hardship?
would that be?
That's in
Yeah, because I know when we start with a rule, we tend to be fairly rigid when we launch the rule, and then sometime thereafter,
and fair.
I'm just wondering what that would look like.
Well, I just. It'd be deliberation similar to what the ZBA goes through, you know.
No hardship, well, unfair, they have something unfair happening to them that doesn't impact their neighbors as well. They typically
Or it's different from any other road. Yeah, this is unique, it has a unique
Property
situation,
related.
and it's not self-created.
I wonder if we would almost use the same criteria as the ZBA.
Sort of hardship, yeah, that's what I'm thinking, yeah. It's only from there to make their appeal. Granted, we don't.
But in this case, I mean, knowing that we can't use Annalinda as the example because it's already filed, but using it as the example because it's already filed and it's a good example. So it's no different than anything that's next to it. I mean, I understand both sides of that challenge there,
Yeah,
but their argument's gonna be it's no different than anything that was here before and exists now.
well, from a personal standpoint, I'm just trying to control the proliferation of private drives. You know, that are sort of being built to no standard, well, we do have a standard in our design criteria for a private road. But you know, what kicks us into a private road, what kind of documentations provided, I think this requires easement, easement agreements and filing and recording of the easements. That the easement would logically describe the ownership and how it's to be maintained.
So using another example, just thinking
Maybe we're
through it,
going beyond our bounds, I don't know.
would this have then driven Mentor? So we just have we have the modification that's happening. It's not a subdivision. But Mentis, where they're replacing that.
House,
Building.
like cabin.
And
This piece.
yeah, so if in that case, if there's another example that you could see a realistic probability of subdivision. But that entire roadway would then need to be brought up to public standard at that point.
Sarah Linda's, we did,
Well,
you did bring that up to. For
And
public
fire,
safety,
yeah,
for
fire access.
It didn't have
It
to-
wouldn't brought up the private drive.
Yeah, it's 12 foot standard.
But there's a
Well,
big,
still,
right, there's a huge
20
difference.
feet.
though.
Yeah.
You're going from a couple dollars a square foot to
$250.
$1 million a mile.
Well, and maybe there's an overlap here with the fire. I mean, you sent out the fire. Lance did, or somebody did
Today,
today. Regarding
Kristen,
fire lanes, and access that's required. And if it's more than a certain
500 feet,
500 feet, it's got to be 20 feet wide.
yep. And have proper space for a pull-off.
Cool.
Yeah, any driveway that extends longer than 500 feet has to have a pullover every 250 feet. And that pullover has a square footage and a width that's associated with it per the law. And then it also has to end with a turnaround. Now that turnaround, it gives us some basic dimensions. Now the state has adopted their state standard that's more geared towards the road. Town of Canandaigua has adopted one that's more geared towards our road. but there's other items that could be, I think, equivalent to a turnaround. But I think the biggest one is the width of the road has to be widened to 20 feet wide. I mean, that's every driveway that we've seen is what, 10 to 12 feet wide? And you're adding at least 8 to 10 more feet to that. I think that's the tough one.
Well, and maybe that can be a justification for this type of regulation is to meet fire and safety code.
Well, the only good thing is it's gonna be written. And from then here on, it'll be enforceable by us.
Right.
It won't be, like Mark said, I need something to look at here. I need something to stand on, and that'll be good for us to be able to stand on. Pre-existing. That's the only good thing I see of it.
I sense there's gonna be a lot of pushback on this.
There is
In the hearings
Monday.
That'll be a good one to zoom into, is what you're saying?
Yeah.
Yeah, get in early.
Is there a limit?
Might be a wait.
I think we have 100.
Well, I think a lot of people who live on private lanes are gonna,
Yeah.
they're gonna interpret this, they're gonna have to bring their private lane up to standards. And it's not necessarily the case, but if status quo, nothing changes.
So in an example of Fallbrook, one of those lots, so we just did a deconvergent, we took 3 lots and turned it into 1, but if they decided that they wanted to pull that out again, then it could potentially happen there too.
Yeah.
Mhm.
There's a lot of places.
Yeah, I don't recall a lot of situations where new lots are created on private drives. I mean, there's a lot of cottages being knocked down and rebuilds and vacant lots are being built on, but as far as a subdivision occurring on a private drive, Sunset.
But you know what, Mark, you're right, because Mentee,
Oh.
is it South Mentee?
Yeah.
There's enough area there for subdivision.
Yeah.
Well, and what
Oh,
is
yeah.
the, I mean, we've got the new builds, this was pre-me, so I was like, I think it's the Cook family that's building 3 is it 3 on 1, or did they subdivide those? Is that already subdivided?
On what, where's that?
It's on Westlake Road,
Oh,
the
the
giant
one,
lot on Westlake Road.
Oh,
Down by the lake.
by the yacht club?
There's
Yeah.
3 separate lots.
That's
That is
not
3
Cook.
separate lots.
Oh, that's the Cook's old property.
How is that?
That's the old,
Yeah.
they sold that to.
Reinhardt's.
Yeah,
Reinhardt's,
Reinhardt.
went out, yeah.
But isn't that a private, well, that's only 3. But is that a private
That
drive?
drive.
Yeah.
That's a private drive, so if they decided to
They're at the end of it.
subdivide the back lots now, and they potentially
Oh,
have
on
to.
Westlake.
Oh,
The Reinhardt's.
Because they're super deep.
Yeah. So there's an easement
Westlake,
between the
yeah.
two properties.
Is that what it is?
Yeah, there's an easement
I'm just
between Westlake Road and those houses. There's a field and there's an easement, 30-foot easement, I think it is, where the
Back
road,
there
where the
too,
road used to
yes.
go.
Is
That
that-
they had to maintain, keep open for people.
Well, the Reinhardt driveway is from Westlake to the house.
Right,
Yeah,
Yeah.
but then
But that's what I'm
between
saying,
90
other
degrees
house-
from that, there's a easement.
So certainly those are,
Yeah.
I mean, that's a large enough set of parcels that could lead to very easy subdivisions that would fit in with the rest of the community.
But then we'd have. Those would be like the lots, minimums.
Minimum,
That's
that's
just,
just,
yeah, that's gotta be.
Yeah, and then we get.
those are
Maybe
1
6 to
acres.
9 acres or
Reinhardt's
something.
over an acre,
Reinhardt is.
way over an acre.
Yeah.
Yeah, those I checked. the update, Over an
I
acre.
think the size and the location of the houses would make it tough to subdivide.
The whole area by West, there's a huge area by
Unless,
Westlake.
maybe out toward the front, toward the road.
Right.
Yeah, They wouldn't subdivide by the waterfront, I don't. think.
No,
No,
there's
there's
no room
down
there.
there.
The field.
The field,
By the way,
you know, where the picket fence is.
Yeah.
Maybe,
Unless
but
you're gonna
that fronts on Westlake,
Well, so I think
so that
from-
wouldn't be an issue.
if we look at the planning board perspective, it also fits within the 5 goals, right? But the only thing that we talk about with the 5 goals, is extending roadways and sidewalks to complete streets. But it does fit keeping the rural character and all of the other objectives that we are commissioned to drive to. So I think that,
Keeping the current road.
no,
Oh.
I'm saying that the, the recommended
Oh,
change.
these,
changes.
okay, well, yeah, roads would have to be built according to town standards and including the town standards, so. These streets.
Yep.
Well,
Glad we don't have to
what's
decide
the
this.
board want to do with this?
So we've been asked to provide feedback.
Yeah, comment on, it, yep. Well, it's being given to us for recommendation, for comments. If we have.
If you have them. You don't necessarily have, right, you have them.
I'd recommend it come back to the town board instead
Second.
Nah, they're just gonna get a bunch of, well, over time, we're gonna go out.
Well, we could say
I'm kidding on
we'd
that.
like
That's not
to,
a-
well, I'm saying I'm thinking it'd be nice to hear from the residents.
Yes.
Prior to offering any comments on our behalf. See what the thoughts are. I mean, I guess I'm a little biased because I sit on the ordinance committee and I, sat through a lot of the deliberations on this, and I certainly understand what administration's problem is with private, undedicated, undersized roads, having to live with them. And this certainly is a way of solving that, but is it too much of a hammer?
I think it's a good starting point. And then once we hear the comments from the public.
Change the law
there's-
again.
Yeah, there's some.
Okay, well, I mean, we don't have to. Again, it's a hearing on Monday night. I don't think the board will take action.
Mhm.
We have the time, sit in, listen to the comments or read the transcript or play the video of the meeting at some point. And hear what the residents' concerns are. And we can reconvene on this ourselves and see if we have any other things to add to the discussion. And if we do, we provide it. If we don't. Okay.
So would you like it back on your agenda at the end of July
Yeah, how about you put
or
August?
August 9th?
August 9th, yeah. I think the earliest town board would act on it would be the August meeting.
They can act on it next week.
But again,
I doubt they will,
I doubt they will.
but they set, this public hearing was set for next week.
they might act on the ag.
Shauna, does the town reach out to the individuals that it's going to impact? No.
No,
It's
Well, they're on the newsletter.
Well-
newsletter, it's public notice, it's in the messenger. I mean, that's all the town is obligated.
the town meets their obligation.
Yeah, I understand that.
That's all I can say.
It's not like where we send out everybody within 500 feet.
Right, I mean,
Of a application.
Right.
Here it's the whole town. Okay. Good discussion. All right, let's move on to nothing from the ZBA, nothing from the CEO. Comprehensive plan, let's move that down and talk about other business. All righty. Let's go around the room. I know, Scott, you had submitted a.
oh, also Chester can't forget the road name.
Oh.
We didn't add it on the agenda, but we can just have to take action.
Can we tell them when we don't like road names?
All right, let's take care of the road names before we
Culver
pull through the cracks.
Drive,
No, I'm not a
Mark
narcissist. that way.
proposes Culvert Circle.
Holy circle. That were the,
Amanda.
where the
Way.
trash dumps.
Yeah. Not Mandy.
Mandy Way.
We have a proposal to name the interior roads of Center Point 3. And they're asking for the planning board to approve or confirm or
Approved.
approve. Okay.
For my clarification, is this something we normally do as a planning board?
It is not, well, yes,
We've
it
done
is,
it,
and almost it's intrinsic, they're on the plan, you probably don't even notice it half the time, right? So when this was approved by you, it was approved as Center Point Boulevard, I think.
Road
but-
A and Road B or whatever it was.
Yeah, but well, Center Point Boulevard extended, but because of the number of homes and for public safety issues, the circle needs its own name as well as the entrance road. So that's where we're at. These have been approved by 911 and they just need ultimate approval by the planning board because it's a change to the site plan.
When does 911, I mean, I guess out of curiosity, because I don't know the answer, Shauna, maybe you don't know either. When the board typically approves the plans, has 911 already weighed in on the road names?
No, no. Chris sends them over, I
After
think
the-
around
right?
pre-construction. So this was flagged because we have the pre-con for Center Point coming up.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm sorry, I was just curious.
Good question. I take that further is when do they assign street addresses?
Usually when RG&E is ready to go in. And they need actual address.
Who assigns?
Chris,
Chris does, okay.
in concert with the county, but he does.
Well, the post office. I assume the post office wants to make sure that there's no other fairway circle in the Canandaigua post office. Mail doesn't get shipped to the lawn. There's 2 Johnson Roads. Trust me. Oh, yeah. And there's a Foster Road or a Foster Street. All righty, anybody have any problem with assigning these street names? No. Okay, I'll take a vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Somebody make a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Bob did.
Trying to do it as a consensus.
Yeah.
Okay, we'll make it more formal. All right,
Thank
Bob
you.
made the motion,
Scott,
Tom made the second. They have been decreed.
They'll say yes.
All right, getting back to special projects. Scott, you circulated a presentation.
Yeah,
And it was
so,
very interesting. Would you mind going
yeah,
through?
we can
it
go
or
through this. So
highlighting?
Verizon, we had a Zoom conference, Sean and I and 2 or 3 reps from Verizon back in May. Upon our request, we went to Verizon because they're the largest cell provider, one of the largest. They were very helpful. You have a chance to look at the presentation. I don't know that we need to go through every, there's some pretty interesting facts in here about the growth, why we're gonna have to look at 5G down the road, obviously, especially now that more and more people are working from home. Again, I won't go through everything, but I thought some of these, the average household has 13 connected devices, and I was counting,
yes.
with smartphones, outnumbering tablets, 6 to 1, so. Yeah, when you think about it, the average family, cell phones, tablets, computers,
Alexa's,
yeah.
So they're talking Wi-Fi connected.
Yeah,
they're not talking
anything.
5G.
Wi-Fi TV.
Yeah.
Right, so I thought that was interesting. Obviously, some more capacity is needed. They've got the standing cell towers as we know them now, and we do have some code relating to those. These are boosters, if you will. I believe they said there's like 4, Sean, in town, in the town of Canandaigua, maybe 2 in the city, and
There's 2 in the town and 2 in the city.
yeah, so
Yeah.
4 total. And of course, they're gonna be looking to expand. Doug heard some of this at one point, and he mentioned, Sean, and I don't know much about it, he said we should talk to, is it Acoustis?
Yeah.
Acoustis, right? Who he said something about one of the largest 5G local companies, and I don't know anything about Acoustis. so-
Well, they are manufacturing some of the technology for 5G and 6G.
Oh, Lord.
I'm not sure what's. 6G.
Okay, so I haven't done that, and I would like to talk to them and maybe they could give us some information as well. Again, this is sort of a phase 1. This, there's a lot to take in here. I will tell you that Penfield and Greece locally both have implemented code changes. Surprisingly, I did talk to Skinny Atlas, Pittsburgh. There's a third, they have not. So I think maybe we're following, we're gonna follow the trend. Obviously, we're in the beginning stage of this as well. But anyways, it was a very informational meeting. Basically, you see, and I was really interested in showing you guys the different styles with all the pictures in here and how they can look and, can they blend in and so forth. Again, Verizon, this is one company, so, take it for what it's worth. They work closely with Penfield. There are state laws that, federal laws, the FCC, there's a shot clock that you have 60 days for small cell co-locations, 90 days for new pole construction. So as a town, we have a time frame. We can't rest on our laurels and kind of put them off. So there are times, of course, there are fees associated. One example, I believe there's a fee schedule that Penfield came out with. It's $100 for the one-time application and then a $50 annual fee per pole. So everyone they place, we would be getting something, and again, there's a max that we're allowed to charge by the government. I want to say it's 200, but that's in the information. So, we can look at fees. I think the first, being the new kid on the block, I don't know how we define code and how we add code, because we really don't have anything right now.
In Penfield's regs, what are they controlling other than charging?
Placement, and I've attached what I sent you is their
Oh,
code.
okay. Oh,
And that's their
okay.
total cell tower. So I guess our first step, we have to look at definitions, because I looked through our code and I don't believe these, there's 8 definitions. I didn't see anything in our code for those. So we would, obviously would add those to the subsection 117. And then the next handout is lengthy. And of course, this encompasses all of the cells. So if you go to page, and we don't, I looked at our code and I think there's 2 sections, Sean, even 22053 and 22060. I think those are the 2 that regulate cell towers
Yes,
and co-locations.
and that large steel.
Yeah, the actual tower. So there's tower base. So the first part of Penfield's code, let's see, 2, 3, 4, tower base. On page 7, C, the following regulations, non-tower WCF that do not meet the definition. So there's several towers, non-towers, but really all of from the rest of this is concerning the small cell. So I don't know, what do we do? If you guys can help me, how do we write the code, or do we, we don't? Is Chris involved? How do we create code? We're not modifying, we're creating.
Well, creation of code would be a recommendation from the planning board to
Okay.
the ordinance committee to take a look at. Maybe even a presentation to ordinance, which is what I'm gonna recommend for solar as well.
And I believe Verizon, and again, we're using Verizon, we don't have to, they were just kind enough, and I believe they attended the Penfield, I got minutes from the Penfield meeting someplace, and I believe Verizon, and I believe it was, Sean, what was her name? She's the last page chair, Katie Carlson actually was the girl that did our presentation, but I think she also was in attendance at the Penfield meeting, so I'm sure we could get her to come out to a more formal board once we get recommendations or, we have questions. And again, I don't know about acoustic. I'm sure what Doug was thinking about tying them in, or just if we.
I think it's more the fact that they are, that's their, part of their business.
Okay.
I think really what we wanted this to happen about a year ago was to make sure that we get on the forefront what you're doing, but then also to make sure that it doesn't make the town uglier.
Right.
We want to
Right.
make sure that,
Right.
our town, the poles that we put in or whatever we approve is aesthetic for the town.
And if you look through the examples, the photos, most of them, they're not creating new poles.
No,
They're
that's my-
attaching to,
To current.
so.
Yeah.
but the distance is so much shorter, that's the thing, especially
Right,
with our
they're not,
development.
they proliferate. they're
Right.
Mending something.
So they also gave us some sample design standards, so small wireless facilities and rights. Wireless providers shall consider visual impact in designing and deploying the SWF, small wireless facility. So there's 2 pages of suggestions for that. So they were very helpful. The ordinance establishing standards for small cell wireless facilities and rights of way in the town of Canada. Master license agreement that we would sign with Verizon. There's the fee schedule, which I mentioned. Penfield is charging $100 one time and then $50 per pole per year. So that would have to be incorporated. So they gave us a lot of examples to draw from as well. So I guess my question is, what is our next step? I can get other code. I know Greece did this. I can pull I just want to sort of focus and then have the board tell me what we should do next.
Did Verizon say what items of their business we cannot infringe on? I know it's cell towers and big structures that the town has no say in where they go and how they go, and it's all PUC regulated. Is there anything in the 5G,
I believe that's, and I read this someplace, that it's planning board decision as to our town planning board suggestion as to where they're placed. I don't remember saying there were any restrictions or that we can't.
well,
impose
there's other
restrictions on
towns
the
that have
view.
adopted regulations and they haven't been challenged. I guess
You don't
it must be
think-
fine so
I
far.
think, so would it be a special use permit or would it come under, how would that? How would they propose to us on that?
Well, if it's in the right of way,
Well, current.
if it's in the right of way, I would say that it would be like a highway from the street from or something like that. Possibly, because I know in my former life, if a utility came in and wanted to put something on a pole or something, kind of was in a township road right away, they had to get a highway from. And most of these are in the right of
And they
way.
do in this sample design standard guidelines on placement of new poles. So again, this is not an existing. New poles shall not impede or obstruct usual public, pedestrian, or vehicular travel, public safety on the right of way. So this is talking about in rights of way. And again, this is for placement of equipment on existing poles. SWF shall not impede or obstruct usual public, pedestrian, same thing. They should be located in a manner that does not unreasonably interfere with existing legal use of right of way. So they do provide guidance for the municipalities to look at as well, which, you think if it's Verizon, they're gonna help themselves, but they're trying to help the municipalities. I got the feeling, anyway, Sean, I don't know how you felt. They're trying to work with the town.
I
So
think they are. I think they're trying to work in order to get a leg up.
Oh,
Which
sure.
is not, I
Sure.
mean, they're.
Well, that's why
a
we went to them,
business.
right,
Yes,
right,
absolutely.
right.
So, yeah, but I sense that. It was hard to get a feel.
Well, I think it crosses over different departments of the town. It's more than just planning.
Mhm.
It's also, if you're gonna get into permitting, then you're in the licensing and in the clerk's office. And then you're also possibly in Jim Fletcher's bailiwick in terms of permitting something within the street right away. So maybe what we ought to do is bring this to the attention of the ordinance committee at some meeting in the future and say, is there a concern here? I mean, is there something the town should be doing related to 5G? And whether we as a planning board want to take a position related to the planning aspects as to the aesthetics and commercial development in the uptown.
Right, we push it uptown, we push it to certain
It's
areas.
something I'm sure there are going to be a lot of facilities related to uptown with 5G.
Oh, yeah.
the streetscape. And how do we control that? I could see that being our charge, but as far as permitting and putting them on existing poles and probably be other departments in the town. But the ordinance committee would look at it from the big picture.
So, in taking a quick look at this, what I had noticed is that Penfield took a pretty exercised effort to make sure that they kept it out of residential areas. I'm pretty happy with
That
the
was
residential.
my
areas.
understanding.
And if we're moving down a direction, two pieces to this, if we're moving down a direction where we're looking for more underground utilities, then that's something that we're gonna wanna pay attention to, because then they would then be motivated either to try to get them on residential, which they don't really wanna be on private property, I'm assuming,
That's my
Or-
understanding.
or putting up poles of some kind, and if it's in an area that, whether it's an agricultural area or a residential area, already got a directive or a direction to get to underground utilities, then we wouldn't want to suddenly see poles popping up for that purpose. I would think that would certainly change the entire character. So I think Penfield certainly took it. I don't know that Penfield has the rural character that we try to enhance, but they certainly have focused on keeping it out of residential, except for power poles and light poles.
Existing.
And Uptown would almost fit it perfectly because those buildings fall into fit Penfield's model almost perfectly because they fall into a commercial type design. Are these line of sight or the RF, do you know? I know they're short distance.
I
but
don't know.
I'm just curious. 'Cause I don't know if like a
I'm not
facade
gonna
on
say
a,
the line.
does the facade on a commercial property block? it, right? So if line of sight, then it would.
I don't think.
Do they have building mounted
They didn't,
receivers?
they didn't discuss those and I didn't see any
Yeah, I'm
examples of
sure if
those,
that's
so I
something
don't
to
know,
do your.
Yeah.
Under the solar panels.
right?
Facade of the building. Okay, so maybe, because then I'm thinking, well, now it's getting into building inspectors, review if it's related to a building. All right, I want to read this town of Penfield, see.
And I can, let me, I actually have Greece someplace, she gave us 2 examples, let me see if I can find Greece again. And again, it's surprised because there's not more municipalities in our general area that are actively doing this, so. All right, let me continue on with that.
Actually enjoy that or something, close it.
That's, it's a lot of research, and,
And they were helpful, like I said, I know they're a company
Helpful with
promoting, but
quality
they gave us a lot to look at and consider.
Slide 17 is awesome.
Slide 17.
Okay.
These things.
so, take a look at that.
They're gonna- I'd say you would- How can candidate?
Mark, do you have anything?
Oh, yes, yes.
Any update on the EV from your presentation at all? You had your, nothing new
Yeah, no.
exciting has come out of the,
No remarkable new changes. You sent me a robotic version of a charging station. So
Yeah.
that's always
Some
interesting to see.
yeah,
I haven't done more with it, so I'm really just looking for the board to at some point tell
Okay.
me if I need to do more.
Facebook is a buzz with people complaining at the lack of people
I
coming in
saw
from out of town.
Oh,
I
And
saw
where do
that
they go?
post.
And they're, and
Yeah.
yes, it's a buzz. Yes.
Where can I, someone's coming into town, where can they?
I'm putting 6 of them at my building for public access. No, actually, we haven't even figured that piece out. I'm not sure I really want them to feed, but you do get more grant money if it's public access.
okay. Amanda, League Commission, I don't know if you've been sitting in on the affordable housing.
If I'm not sitting in, I'm reviewing the YouTubes. I have ideas. I have low hanging fruit versus less than low hanging fruit. So in acclimating to affordable housing, I recognize this is like the first time we're talking about it as a group. So just to set the stage, so to speak, I'll try not to be so verbose in the talk. The scorecard that we did with our joint meeting,
Yeah.
the average score was a C from everyone on affordable housing. So yes, definitely some work to do. It's a lot of little things. It's a lot of different things all over the board that, not board, but all over the board that can be done and exploring. And I'll say for the Affordable Housing Committee and the people on that, they turn over every single rock, maybe a couple of times at, a few different meetings to talk about what are the different avenues that we can explore. But I was looking at what could we do here? What is the lowest hanging fruit? What are more things that maybe we can talk through with either ordinance or town board? What are some things that are actionable instead of let's get grant funding, or instead of rewriting tax code or whatever. But so let me get to it here. There's a couple of things in the comp plan in a couple of places where in the, now I forget the name of the section, but it's like the actions related to each step,
Action items.
right? And that, duh, action items. And those are actually pretty specific in a lot of places. So I was looking at it, and the most specific one that I think is the lowest hanging fruit, so to speak, is reviewing the existing codes for some target zones, like here, neighborhood, commercial, community, commercial, industrial, multiple residential, blah, 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 a couple of acronyms in there as well. That was designated to the ordinance, but I say, why don't I just take a stab at review there, send it to you guys, and we can take a stab at it, send it to ordinance if we see that there's any changes, and then, go from there and trying to, get something crossed off the list, because right now the Affordable Housing Committee is all about collecting data, right? They're talking about all the different ways we can make housing more affordable. And I mean, that's even more of a priority now in 2022 inflation. So that was one proposal that I wanted to bring to you. And I'm like setting deadlines for myself because I need to do it and review it. So another part of the comp plan is to, in general, review town code for any potential updates related to how could we, if there's any loosening, so to speak, of restrictions. So that was another thing that could be something that we could pursue. And these are things that I'm like taking as action for myself. I did want to talk, and this came up on the May 20th meeting that I reviewed over YouTube because it was just a couple of days post-op, but incentivizing affordable housing. I know that's a hot topic. So these topics, as I progress, get more and more contentious, if you will. So incentivizing affordable housing. So I started writing this down before I heard Karen bring it up. We incentivized Piercebrook to increase their density by, committing to the pathways and the open space, exactly. And the code, as it's written around incentivizing zoning districts, has a lot of overlap with the target zones that were noted in the comp plan as places to look at as potential target zones for increasing potential affordable housing. So I know this is kind of like we don't know how to cross this bridge yet. And I'd say it's probably not in favor with some folks, but I would like to take a look at that piece. This is kind of longer term, but take a look at that piece in the code to see if there's a valid proposal that we could do. Like the Piercebrook was adding 20% for the open space, the greenways. Maybe it's adding 20% if 10% is affordable, or if 10, 15, 5, well, whatever, land on a number, we'll see. That's the intention that I'm working towards and looking at that. It's not, as I understand it, as I view it, looking in, it's maybe not favored by all, but there's obviously something that needs to be done to increase affordable housing in the town. And I'm just gonna throw the spaghetti at the wall and see what sticks. That's my approach here. I'm a
Amanda, you
newer
mentioned
kid on the block, so
the
yes,
incentive.
yes.
Certainly aware of the things. Are you aware that the town is considering incentive zoning as a option that
Okay,
applicant, property owner has a piece of land, that they could be, you give me this and we'll give you that type
Yeah.
of situation. And possibly, if someone's willing to come in and build affordable housing, there's something the town can give them in return.
yeah,
In terms of lot size or something.
yes,
Yeah,
yes,
the
that's
zoning can
perfect,
be
yes,
rewritten.
yes,
Basically. That's
that's perfect,
And
yes,
minimum square footage for a house could be redone.
right.
Oh, yeah, oh,
Because
yeah.
that's
So
code.
Right,
all-
that's, yeah,
All things are on the table.
That's-
Incentive
that's
zoning.
the
It's
key,
a
yes.
negotiated plan.
that's bingo, that's.
When
That's the one.
you're at 5 and 20 in Geneva, you're coming down the hill, the green
Mhm,
affordable housing, is
mhm.
there something that,
Ryan, he's on our team, our affordable housing, team, Ryan Wallace.
is something that I think it's a neat concept.
Those are really expensive. Those homes specifically were, but he has a.
Expensive
model.
for the, are they rent or are they?
No, they are
purchase?
purchased, but they're pretty, I think each unit is about 350,000.
But
No.
wasn't he looking at
But
apartments?
yes,
Yeah.
but he has.
Okay.
a
And they're all
prototype.
green.
They're all green.
Okay.
They're all manufactured
Uh-huh,
locally, and his facility is fascinating, how he. It's amazing, he's amazing, but he has a 50 unit model? Or is it
I'm not sure.
30?
All I heard was
He has a
multifamily.
low income multifamily.
So those homes,
unit.
as you see them, are 350,000.
They were very expensive.
They're
Now,
not cheap.
there were subsidies,
mhm,
yeah,
I was shocked. Those.
Yeah.
NYSERDA.
Again, I thought it was.
Didn't bring
more
it in at the
affordable.
price point.
right,
Yeah,
but his unit, his building that he has, and for some reason 50 is sticking in my head, but I think it's a $5 million build and maybe 20 to 30 units, now that I'm thinking it through. That he's looking to place in the town, in Uptown, as part of the form-based code.
Is there a definition for how?
Yeah, that's what I was gonna ask.
I mean,
No,
affordable, no,
well, so
it's very,
it's-
I mean, especially now.
Well, so there kind of is.
30% of your income is what
Okay.
affordable is. From the comp plan and table 5, page 48, if you want to take a peek at it. This is data from 2013 to 2017. I'm just gonna rattle off some things here. 100% of renters that make less than 20,000 a year spend 30% or more on rent. If you make less, you're spending more on rent. And then that even stays from 20,000 to 35,000. About 92% of renters are spending more than 30% on their rent. And this is 2017,
I think
right?
I
Like,
think it's 50%
So
now.
It's
yeah, I was gonna say,
insane,
it's
I mean.
now it's-
and at the last affordable housing committee meeting, there was, discussions on, are we focusing on rental or are we focusing on purchasing? And you kind of have to focus on both, but I think what we will see most likely are developments and rentals, but we could possibly see more, depending on if there's any incentive zoning that goes into place, potentially like single family homes or multifamily homes, but the rentals is where I spent a lot of my digging and brain power. Yes.
And it's very difficult to come up with a number, so I think everybody knows that I'm a number junkie. So we make the medians. So if you look at the median income of the town and then the median price of the town, we are dead spot on. Right? If you look at the medians.
If you look at the medians.
So the other
But it's all in
definition
how
that
you
I've seen of
manipulate
it
the
is,
data.
well, the other definition, if you look at state and HUD, then they state it's subsidized housing. That's how they define affordable housing, it's subsidized housing. Has nothing to do with the cost of it. Everybody agrees with the
Yeah.
30% number, but
Yeah.
in the definition of subsidized housing, it's either that 30% number, which you then have to figure out how to calculate,
Right.
or subsidies.
And I think another key piece to this, when thinking about affordable housing, is that it's a cross-functional issue. It's not just affordable housing, it's housing for people with disabilities. It's housing for people that are choosing to age in place and they need quote unquote universal design to have, single level living, wider hallways, et cetera, et cetera. It's not just a price point, it's the person, right? Like to get sappy about it, it's the family, it's the person. And so if I come back to my action plan here, I'm sorry, I am trying to look everyone in the eye. It's weird though, kind of like, I'm like, I would want to be right there, but that's fine. It's fine. And Chuck, I know you've brought up the accessory dwelling units, and I think that's on the furthest end of contention with a lot of people
The tiny homes.
as well. The tiny homes, the smaller than normal homes.
Or at least allowing them.
Yes.
Certain
Personally,
sizes.
I'm all for it, but I know a lot of the town are, like the development in Geneva that you're talking about, regardless of the price point that those individuals paid, there's some disagreement on whether that is aesthetically pleasing or not. And that's,
Well, they're not
That's
pretty. I will
cool.
on record say they're not pretty, and at that price point, I am shocked. I mean, I had, again, I
Have you
said,
walked through it?
no,
Because
no, I have
the
not.
aerial view and the pedestrian view are very,
very different.
The design build
Yeah.
is amazing. I mean, you can.
Yeah, they're
You can heat them with a candle. I mean, they're-
How much green space? Do they have yards? Do they have, I mean, how many units are in there? I'm trying to
Well, it's in the
recall.
city, so you gotta look at that, right?
He sold out. I mean, so
Yeah,
somebody,
Big and I'm shocked.
yeah.
good for them.
He's got an amazing factory. I mean, I looked
His
at him for a
factory is
project.
super cool.
Where's
Beginning.
Where's his? Right as you
Geneva.
head into
Oh, in
Geneva.
Geneva.
Oh,
Foot of the hill,
Oh, yeah.
by the
Yeah.
ice, skating rink.
Near the ice, across from the ice cream.
Yeah.
Maybe that's why they're buying there. Yeah, probably. Yeah, I would look at tiny houses,
We
accessory
have that
buildings.
on our list for ordinance too.
Do we do
Part of
that?
the challenge
Okay.
though with
We have
tiny
it.
houses is that they're not cheaper. They're much more expensive to build, and that's where the homes project that I don't know how to call it, because I'm not allowed to call it what I think it is, at the north part of town. Even that would not qualify on a monetary basis, and you don't build a less expensive home, and those aren't big. And then the problem is that I think our problem is that we can encourage it to come, but then we can't sustain the market price. I mean, I think if, I'll use an example, not in the town, gypsum mills, those started out at $40,000 a piece.
Wait,
still
how do
don't-
you guarantee that are you saying to lock that in,
Well, I'm saying
the
we
market,
can't, the
Dictates that.
planning board can't do that.
right?
So, and because of the demand here, it elevates the value.
Price.
So it's a vicious cycle.
Mm.
So what we end up doing is if we do less expensive housing, then we encourage potentially lower quality housing, because it's less, that's what you normally attribute to less expensive housing. And then you've got a problem in 20 years. So I don't know how
But it-
planning does it.
Isn't that why the county is now looking at this?
The
thing?
county is, so
We're
our,
looking at a county wide, so you have areas such as the town of Canandaigua that maybe due to the price of real estate, or you can't put affordable housing. But you get to East Bloomfield or some area up there where.
Or you allow some type of large scale multifamily high density. I think that's a place, that's a place where you might be able to, right? But I still think without subsidy, because that isn't that what? And I always thought this was a ridiculous example. I think Creekview is the closest current
Creekview
example.
is subsidized.
But if you,
It's not subsidized.
Well,
it's,
okay.
yeah, it's a current housing.
And then
Right,
DeMarco will tell you that.
But it's, wasn't,
Which is why.
So it's not, preview is not subsidized.
It's not subsidized. In the financing to build it, they got
Yes.
grants.
the craziest example.
So they were able to
keep
build it cheaper
Yeah.
with the grant money, therefore they could keep the rent lower.
But wasn't
Not
Holiday
subsidized,
Harbor?
they
You still kick them out there. if they can.
Holiday Harbor in the city,
No, Holiday Harbor in the city, I think that was originally built as affordable housing.
was it?
I think so. And that's why it's all common heating and everything else that comes with it. So that wasn't it, that might be the worst example of ever occurring.
At least today.
Well, just because of the ridiculous values that they command, right? And this, if we're that popular of a space, I don't know that without rent controls. I don't know how planning does it. I mean, and I've tried to think through this because I really struggle with the number. And I like having a number, and I appreciate as well what you're saying is it's about bringing the entire family and whatever the needs are to it. But it's figuring out how to do it and then
Yeah.
sustain it. I think
Yeah.
you can build it. And you get it for a period of time until you don't, because they're gonna be, they'll be incentivized to
Right.
raise the prices or not take care of it.
Yeah. And
Or lose the subsidy and then.
And then the rest.
exactly, yeah. And I definitely initially also struggle with that as well. Like it's such a huge thing. There's so many factors that pull into it. It's how is that sustainable? And I totally support that. And I had to shift my mind to be like, in this moment of time, what is actionable? Like, if I can pick up something right now, what can we do now to possibly benefit like 1% or 2% of people? And it's just a lot of these little things that are gonna add up. And I mean, everyone's very committed to it, right? But it's finding the action steps. So that's kind of where I'm at, where I'm
Okay.
like, there's things that can be done. I have a task list, but
So, work on your action steps.
Yes.
and Prioritizing, I guess you said the low hanging fruit. It's easier.
Your perspective is really refreshing. By the way.
Instead of saying all the time, what the hell? We can't do
Well,
that."
Right, oh my God, we can't do
I
it.
mean, it's, at about the 40-minute mark in those meetings, there's a brick wall and then everyone just starts doing
Yes,
this.
So-
that's when I start to
And-
zone out,
Yeah.
because I'm
Yeah.
just like, oh my gosh, this is too much.
So what I'm back to the same thing.
Yes, yes.
Something to
Yes.
recommend never doing. And as Walmart was being built in Victor, Jack Richter at a town meeting stood up and said, Victor doesn't need affordable housing. That's why we have Farmington.
Ooh.
Oh, wow.
Hope no one says that in Canada,
Okay.
please.
Moving down
Nice
the
little
line,
anecdote.
Mr. LaCourse. Now we get the easy stuff.
Oh, solar, that's no brainer.
Oh, yeah.
No-brainer.
I'm saving yours and mine for
Did
last.
anybody have any questions on the solar product that I did? I'll kind of go over a couple of major things on
Let's
it.
talk, let's not get too much into the batteries.
Okay.
Boy, that's. Is this mostly stuff you got from Dave? Or-
From the New York State
Okay,
and Dave, battery storage is coming.
Yep.
It's a standalone system,
yep,
or it can be a combination with a large scale or system, tier 3, tier 4. And it needs to be a standalone.
Yep, no, I agree.
And I didn't write this, I mean, you're talking about writing code and things like this, I'm not like a code writer. There was an example in the New York State
Okay.
solar plan, and I took that format example and made it for the town. And that's what the town battery code is for. And basically, the town battery, not to spend more time on it, but the batteries are like 3 or 4 container trucks, big, they're huge. And they need certain fire protection and things like that. And basically, they're there for when at night, when the solar's not being utilized, it's basically a big capacitor, and it's going to be feeding the grid with power when low time. And they are coming. Everything I've read about them is that they're forthcoming. And we should be able to be ready.
So I think the only thing that I saw in it that I couldn't quite tie to, and maybe you have addressed it, I just didn't catch it, is the Tesla batteries right now. Is that because could those be outside?
So your Teslas that I know of that we're talking about is mainly for the home, right? So that's talked about in tier 1 or tier 2s. It's basically home utilization, and the battery energy storage is kind of talks about that a little bit. Your home storage batteries. Things like that.
And I think those are almost always interior anyways, aren't they? Or
I've seen them all in garages and things like that. Yeah, yeah, you want your batteries inside your transformers and things like that to be outside. They make noise. So that's battery. It's coming, I think. Now for the solar plant itself, I started thinking because just trying to control the eyesore in town, basically. And also my other question is when do we take on enough? When can we say no? Why does town of Canandaigua have to take on the percentage of New York State that's going on? So that's one of my big questions is when can we say we've had enough? We have too many as it is right now. So what is that number? I don't know.
And I thought we had a throttle to control that with the taxing situation. We do not, the town has not acquiesced to granting relief from taxes,
We will not,
Yeah.
not really
which
But
some
I don't
you would
think
think
that
scare people off.
matters in this point, right? I think it's not scary.
Some of the,
And scared them off. Yeah.
some of the communities,
Lances away.
some of the communities that we're dealing with are also trying to figure that same thought process out. So what we've been trying to work with them on is maybe not so much, because I don't know that you can omit it and say, no, we're not gonna allow it, but maybe you can increase your buffering and limit the locations and increase the parcel size to make it more difficult to find a person willing to cooperate to do the solar. So
Yeah,
I know the town of Rush is going through this now. I know Avon is looking into it as well. So farmland, prime soils, ag and markets, utilizing their code, regulating it a little bit more. You have a farmland protection plan. It's just make it more difficult for them to come in. I think that's probably our best recourse right now, but I don't know legally, and that's a question for an attorney, if we can even regulate it so that you don't allow it at all. I don't know if that is permissible.
That'd be
So
exclusive.
Lance, that's what I did propose that in this document, several new bufferings. And I just want everybody to understand too, we only have large scale and small scale. New York State covers in tiers, actually 1 through 4. So, and for the board to understand that anything up to 25 megawatts, we could possibly approve. 20 to 25, there's a gray area there. Anything over 25, it has to go to ORS, they call it, the Office of Renewable Energy Siting. So anything over 25 megawatts, it's not even going to come to the town. They're taking care of everything. We don't have much to say about any over 25 megawatts.
Yeah, those are your Article 10s and your 94Cs that we don't get to see.
and we can't even reject those.
No,
So is that in line with like a telecommunications tower? It's governed by something
higher than
higher
us.
than us? Okay.
Yeah, but those are also like 100-acre parcels and, you know, you don't see many of them because we don't have those type, I mean, I don't know that to be true, but you're seeing them in like Mount Morris and Livingston County area where they're engulfing 5 farmlands and they're thousands and thousands of acres. That's where it becomes profitable for them.
Yep.
They need to have acres, you know?
So one of the other things I changed on here is the process to which I think the town was doing already, but it wasn't in writing. Is how it goes through PRC, the zoning officer, and the ag committee before the planning board would see it on a special use permit. That was one thing I recommended. Also, I did take away one of the ag zones, but added one of them back in.
Did you, was it A or 2 you took out?
He took
They are
care
too.
too.
I mean, I'm
You're right, Chuck.
looking for, I mean, that's all I just,
No, coincidentally.
But-
It's coincidental, it's
Okay.
the proposal.
so there is waivers, which I said here later on, you can, but they can waiver that, go through the waiver process, waiver and appeal process through the town. So,
Well, if it's not approved in that zone, it's a use variance.
right,
So
but
there is a
we,
relief code, is that relief found?
right, yeah, and it's in our town code already to do that.
So you put the AR1 back in,
Back in,
you put the AR2 still out.
still out.
We have, here's, do I see in the notes,
There are 2.
2.
Yeah, anyway, go ahead.
Yeah, so. I'm just trying to go through the big points. The buffering zone, which is already in our town code for mobile home parks, home parks. There's a 50-foot buffer around mobile home park. So I just took that and brought it into the solar park. And basically, if you're gonna build a solar farm, you're gonna buffer it with 50 feet. And I gave it a definition of what a buffer is, or what it could be. And I basically said also that it would be around also adjoining properties also, so not just on the roadside. If there was houses on the one side or whatever, so there would be a buffer. There's also talk in here and in the New York State about soil testing. Because the company has to bring it back to the ag level that it was at 30 to 40 years whenever they started this. So, but there's no proof of the pudding on what it was like. So I put into the code that we would do soil testing, or they would do soil testing. That would be provided to the town, and it would be 2 per acre or something like that. And then on decommissioning, another soil sample would be taken, basically the same areas hopefully, and it would be a comparison of the 2 soils to see if they brought it back to standard or how it was in the beginning.
Yeah, Bob, that's a good point. I know Farmington just this year added that into theirs. They followed Ag and Markets and Cornell Institution in terms of their procedures. So their code has some language that I think would be useful. And then Avon also just recently put it in theirs as well. They call it a baseline prior, establish a baseline. It's a soil analysis and report that gets provided. And then that gets approved as part of the review process. And then ultimately, then going forward, like you said, either during construction, after construction, and during the life of the project, additional testing can be done.
Yep. The other thing we need to know about that I put in here also, I'm just kind of talking on the top of my head here, is that the height of the panels. Right now, there's a certain height that it can only be, but it can be extended to, I think, 20 feet, I think it is. I don't know what it is top of my head. But there's an option for the farmer to actually utilize the land underneath the solar panel. So if that farmer, wants to lease his land for solar, but he wants to still utilize the land underneath it, that we can bring that panel up a little bit higher so that he can use the land underneath that he wants to.
Something to
Yep.
think about there.
It could be shocking.
It could be.
Well, no, they could actually use it for irrigation. if you get an area that doesn't have as much water, that they would tend to bring it in, then they could use that runoff or water the property. So it's more about spaces. and
runoff from the
adjacent- From the solar
base.
panel.
Oh,
Yeah.
Interesting, yeah.
The arrays.
okay.
Yeah, we're seeing it in Livingston County. It's called like coexisting. And then they're raising the panels up, mostly for livestock right now. It's a collaboration between how they're maintaining the grass, right, with sheep or cattle. That's really what we've seen so far, because we're not quite sure with the limited sunlight what you're gonna grow underneath in terms of like crop, but there's tons of stuff that we can look into, but they're looking into the same thing, Bob.
Yeah, good. So the other thing that I brought up at the last solar company that came in was the noise levels.
Mhm.
One thing I found out about this is the town doesn't have a noise ordinance. So, right,
Right.
still. So in accordance with the New York State, the builder has to give to us all the standards, all the noise standards, all the national hazardous information of all the motors, the panels, anything and everything that we want, the transformers, things like that. And normally they're like 60 decibels, something around that. The interesting thing on the last solar panel company, which I don't know if it's going to go through, you said may not.
They just sold to
Okay.
a Colorado company, so yes, that's gonna be.
So they were the first ones that are going to do rotating panels. And there's 2 motors that run that, active and passive. Active is on a motor, passive runs off of heat transfer through a tube. Basically, it's just really quiet. So the motors run probably 20 panels on a rack. So you add that all up, and we asked for that data last time. So they have to provide that data to us for that. Lot coverage didn't change too much. The fencing didn't change too much.
It's higher.
A little bit higher, yeah, because that's what the New York State level was. The solar systems, I said, will not be constructed in the scenic viewshed lands, maps 4 and 5 of the town comp plan. And the developers must complete a zone of visibility impact assessment. That's right according to New York State. So they have to complete this assessment on the site analysis, and that has to be provided to us. So that really, nothing really changed on those small systems going into a home. So it's still, you can put panels on top of buildings for commercial use. That did not change at all. And yeah. I thought 1,000 square feet was kind of small for residential after I started doing some research, and it's actually quite a bit. We have
Panels.
yeah, panels.
Floor size.
Yeah. And just so everyone knows, when we do the lot coverage, it's all the panels combined together as they're flat, not if they're an angle.
For the 1,000 square footage, if you want to look at that, and consider it to be, so I'm assuming you're thinking of that as freestanding.
It would be a freestanding home use panel system, yeah.
Would you also limit the roof coverage? So if they've got
No.
5,000
So
square foot
no,
of roof,
it wouldn't. No.
so just the
The
freestanding.
freestanding one, I think the town even talks about that. They differentiate the roof mounted and that other one. We did have one guy over in Middle Cheshire come in for special use because he exceeded the 1,000 foot square footage on his house. But then if that happens, it's special use back to us. Anything under 1,000, they don't have to do a special use.
Doesn't deny, it just requires it's not an automatic denial, it just requires review.
Correct, that's it. Yep. So those are the biggest things are buffering. Where it's gonna be placed, for site. The battery storage. The buffer, and added all the definitions toward the back, what all the tiers are, which New York State is using. So a buffer zone, I said, was a natural occurring or planted area to buffer a roadway, building, or property. It should be comprised of densely populated, naturally grown trees, shrubs, blah, blah, blah. 50 foot deep 12 feet high.
Okay.
I can put together something.
Great job. Yeah, I'm to the point, if there's no objection here, I think we're ready. I think there's a sense of urgency with the solar. And I think we should at least be in front of the ordinance committee.
If-
Consider it.
Right, if you're comfortable, I could push it, at least talk to John about maybe on
Well,
the next
John,
slide.
I know John's got his list. Action items.
He does, but the suggestion was to switch to a consent agenda where the board, where the committee.
Oh, votes on which, okay,
Which one will be the priority?
okay. Bob,
I can put something together whenever.
okay, and might ask you to come in and make a presentation.
Yeah.
Ordinance
Do
committee.
you wanna, if John's good with it, come to the next one?
When is that?
BT. It's come out. Monday.
Oh,
Yeah, because you emailed me what's on the agenda today.
Yeah, I can.
I'll talk to him and then, yeah.
You have a town format for PowerPoint? The standard PowerPoint?
all right.
We will now.
All right.
And I think at that same meeting, you can brief them on the batteries,
Batteries.
something coming down the line. Something.
Yeah, I think
Yeah. Maybe spend a little more time on that.
it needs to be a separate code.
Okay, it's down to me.
That's you.
And I'm the only thing between now and holding you people up from going home. My task was to look at the site design and development criteria manual to make sure there was nothing in there that restricted us from applying the complete streets. And we had with, and for those of you who aren't familiar, this is what it looks like. It's a engineer's Bible. Mark, you'd love it. If you haven't read it.
Mark, do you have a copy? We should print you out one.
Oh, awesome. I mean, it's got lots of details, typical sections, cross sections. And, you know, we certainly give MRB credit for a lot of the information that's in here, but it was last revised back in 2018. We had a committee that sat down and went through it page by page. That included Jim Fletcher and Lance and another fellow who was an engineer and myself. And we produced this product, which we feel is much more user-friendly. And we did at the time have the input from the Complete Streets Committee as far as the request that Complete Streets be considered as part of all projects. And that's essentially where the committee left it. It was sort of a guideline. It didn't get into any details as to which streets would apply to, you know, where the complete streets will apply to which streets in terms of their hierarchy, whether they're collector streets, residential streets, how they would be developed, although we did include in the typical sections a cross section of what the street would look like as a typical street, including gutters and bike lanes and sidewalks and all that. So that information is in here. So if anybody would be required to provide a complete street, they can go to, it's in our design manual. They're obligated to meet those design standards. But I think as part of what Lance, Shauna, and Jim Fletcher and I are doing currently is going through the whole manual. Since it hasn't been updated since 18, Jim's got some suggested revisions in terms of product details, you know, type of asphalt to be used, new types of water meters and distribution systems. So anyway, that's being done along with this focus on complete streets. And I think what I'm coming to conclude is we as a planning board don't know where to apply the complete streets and how we apply it. And I think, as I suggested at our joint meeting with the town board, was that we ought to have a highway management plan that would lay out all the streets currently and decide which streets either will be converted to or in future developments expanded upon to include a complete street design so that we know as a planning board, when we look at a plan, that, okay, Little Cheshire Road is forecast to be a complete street at some point in the future. You, the developers that you're building along the frontage of Little Cheshire, have to bring it up at least across your frontage. And included in that would be, I think we need a little more guidance on sidewalks. I think we should have a sidewalk master plan also. And so a highway master plan combined with a sidewalk master plan, I think that's where we're going. So it's not an issue of us restricting it in any way in our regulations, but we don't know where to apply it when it comes to looking at an application that comes to the board. So that sort of the way I'm leaning. Lance, you want to add anything? I know you're working on the latest revision that we talked about at our last meeting.
Yeah, so yeah, exactly. I'm hoping to get that over to you guys this Friday. The first round of revisions based on our conversation, which is really for the most part gearing to updating it to match the complete streets. It has some components to match our new and improved private drive discussion that took place earlier. And then there were some just general notes based on Fletcher, like you said, and materials that we're updating. We do have a highway master plan. We call it a highway roadmaps that labels for the highway department all the roads in the town of Canandaigua. So they have it's a very basic highway map, has all the highway roads and names of the roads. So that might be a good starting spot, Chuck, to branch off from and start looking at what makes the most sense for complete street projects.
Yeah, I talked to Jim about this, and that plan is more his maintenance plan.
Correct.
He uses it for, which streets are to be chipped and which streets are to be micro-planed, and so he has a 5-year or 10-year plan as to which streets are going to be done when. Here I'm talking about a planning tool that will define all our streets in terms of whether they're arterial streets, collector streets, residential streets, minor residential streets, private drives. And so we know that when we look at a plan, we know that that street should be to that standard. And if it's to be a complete street, that it be done so in any development the town may do or the developer may do.
Understood.
Yep. So that's, and the sidewalk plan is a no-brainer. Man, between sidewalks and trails, I don't know if we have anything that interconnects and coordinates and codifies, where trails, how trails are tying to sidewalks. And I mean, we talk about sidewalks should be out in the middle of nowhere. Well, if we have a sidewalk plan that shows that, okay, folks, we plan on that sidewalk eventually being there at some point, and you have an obligation under your frontage to put that in, now's the time to do it. So we don't.
And what type of sidewalk? Is there a sidewalk and a gutter, or is there a sidewalk and lawn, then whatever, then, what is that?
Well, in our cross sections, we show all that. It's a 5-foot sidewalk, usually has a 6-foot grass strip and all that. So anyway, that's where I am with that project. As far as our annual report, I looked at this year's report, and if you folks haven't looked at it, we introduced Amanda as a member of the board, and we can now introduce 2 other gentlemen to the board, so that can be part of that. Usually do an overview of how many applications we receive. Where members are participating in other committees. Are you still on the tree committee?
I'm on the tree committee.
What they have called it?
Yeah.
Okay. Anyway, that would be in that paragraph. Then I am thinking that each one of us write a paragraph related to our projects. as to where we stand and similar to what, a review of what we presented tonight. And we would include that where we are in our annual report. And more importantly, what do we see moving forward in terms of new challenges and new initiatives? This year, the comprehensive plan update for the base code was adopted or to be adopted. Off-street parking revisions. Yeah, we didn't get into that too much. NRI implementation, which occurred, and the conservation subdivision revision.
When does this get submitted?
Well, it's supposed to go in July under the letter of the law, but we usually get it in September. Roughly, it's tough to do an annual report in the middle of the year. I run calendar years, so if we can.
Should we shoot for the end of August?
Yeah, the earliest, yeah, I'd say the end of August. So if you could get that paragraph into Shauna next month, that would be great. And look at the any other comments or desires you'd like to have included in this year's edition. Okay.
How about the goal would be to have a draft for the end of August and then final in September?
Yeah, how about knowing that these first meetings in the month is usually a slower meeting. What do we have for the September, the first meeting in September? Yeah. Alrighty. Oh, we thought it was gonna be a short meeting, didn't we? Okay, any update on training?
Just the Canandaigua, the 28th at New York Kitchen. New York Planning Federation. I don't want the topic, but if anybody wants to do that, Scott's doing it. Anybody else? Please help me out.
When is it?
September. I don't know the time. Is it all day?
11.
I feel like it's not all day.
No, 9 to
2
1,
hours.
8:30 registration. And
Why don't I send out the info?
that's half a day.
They have a little bit more detail.
And John's good at putting the training that's available usually from the county and from the Tennessee regional planning and New York Federation.
You come, I don't think I'm here. I think I'm in.
Okay, so did Ally update take care of Mark's issue with his hours? Have you worked your hours out with Ally in terms of your training?
She said she was gonna review it after everybody was back and she's confident that it's gonna get in.
Okay.
Perfect.
So I think she wanted to talk to you about it.
Okay,
Because you were
maybe
out
because I was on vacation.
Anybody have anything else? Yes, no.
On the upcoming applications, I just have.
Yeah, I was just, that's,
Okay, one
Yep.
question.
you have a question on a particular one or? You want
Yeah, I
to-
do. Finger Lakes Public House, so.
Yep.
Work's already done, new owners, correct?
New owner.
So this is for prior owners who did it without permitting,
Yep.
and so now,
Correct.
so what is just fill me in, so
So.
they bought the property, the new owners.
So I believe that it was a threesome. One of the owners was removed and maybe 2 new owners came in. Regardless, they made improvements to the fence, put in a patio. Prior to that, I think the Daubers owners put in the cooler. I don't know.
Coolers there.
Yeah, so there was improvements made even before they took over. So these are to kind of get it approved. Like forgiveness, forgive us, like this is what we've
All right,
done, with some suggestions.
And some
For
improvements.
safety, yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely, those planters are gonna be giant for you know, pedestrians because the patio, not, they're calling it a paved area, it's a patio or outdoor seating. So, so that's basically the history there.
So we have that, we have,
What stimulated their request? Did they stimulate their request or was their
No,
request?
they're
stimulated? Code enforcement
violations.
officer.
Well, it was the country club that I think initiated everything
The defense.
with the fence.
so they called Chris went out.
Yeah, it's been ongoing for a year. So,
Okay.
yeah. But the
Uh,
new owners, I will have to say, have been very, very amenable and easy to work with.
So
They
as
just wanna
planning
get it.
board. I mean, it's done.
It's-
We
it's-
have two options, right?
Well,
tear it
some of
down.
it is
Right, I
done,
mean,
but some of it isn't, i.e. the parking is there, but there's no provisions for, well,
it
fire.
includes landscaping.
Right, landscaping is not
No landscaping
included, so they might
currently.
have to make some upgrades. If you look at my ZLD, there's some things that need to be discussed related to what's required for site. plan.
So we can do additions or
I think it sounds like a field trip.
improvements, but anything that we've
They
done.
have good food there. I like their food.
It's getting good reviews.
We all have to recuse ourselves because of the.
Did you eat, have you eaten there?
I
So-
Oh,
And
yeah.
I'm a CCC member, so
Oh.
I'm on both
So
sides.
you're on the fence.
Both sides of the fence.
They're on the fence.
But,
You've got some good ones, Charlie.
Okay, Shotland, going back to ZBA this month,
ZBA next week.
see how they make out. Depends whether we'll see them or not.
Got
Mr. Hill the
Hill
same.
is going to, not only, this needs to be updated, he, not only is it a setback, but it's over 4,000 square feet of disturbance and a moderately steep slope, so for an accessory structure, so it's not even permitted. So we'll see what the ZBA says about that. 46 and 47 are officially off the agenda.
Oh, they are. Cool.
Yeah.
Said that.
So they're gone.
Okay,
And then we've got artisan
Artisan
meats.
Meats, which is another ZBA, right?
okay.
Yeah.
So we lost what, two,
Lost
depending how the
two.
ZBA does. Maybe
We
lose
could
two more.
potentially lose 2 more.
Okay, well, we're ready, willing, and able if they come to us. All right, thanks for coming out tonight, folks. I appreciate it. I think we've got some housekeeping done, and it's good. With a big crowd. Thanks, Kim, for coming. John, you got all that? And with that being said,
We're waiting for Amanda.
I
Waiting
make
for
a
Amanda.
motion, I make a motion for 8:02 to adjourn this evening.
I will second that one.
Here, here.
motion second, in favor,
All in favor,
Aye.
yes, aye.
nobody opposed.
I'm so sorry.
I'm glad you're doing well.
Aw.